right before you and I faced off, I was doing Kegels.
That's why you beat me. I did none.
You weren't doing
I
Kegels.
did none.
If you draw every day for an extended period of time without a break, with devotion in your heart, the line will wake up. When you wake up the creative force, it wants to go somewhere. And it's also magnetic. Lights, everyone, adoration, magnetism, it's all happening. This is probably when I should introduce myself.
Yes.
My name's Zyla. I'm Kim's angelic psychic. Bring back the erection.
Yes.
After the battle, if the warrior is not weeping with their fellow warriors, is a problem. I'm so glad that he never stopped singing, that every juncture he made it through, and that the song is reaching me now. It's such a blessing.
Hallelujah. Kim Krans is the quintessential artist, and she's perhaps the most well-known for her oracle decks. Now, what is an oracle deck? An oracle deck is based around this original concept of the tarot, and the tarot are different archetypes that have been honed down through time to provide guidance for an individual at any stage of their life, real time. How does it work? Well, it works because you tap into your extrasensorial open channel where there's something weaving through you that allows you to choose the just right card for the just right moment to give you some guidance for your life. Now, Kim has taken the tarot and said, what if we make other oracle decks? And one of these decks is the Archetypes deck. And this Archetypes deck is what guides our journey today, a journey that explores the archetype of the shaman, the mountain, the mask, all looking at where are we going? What are we doing? How do we guide not only this podcast, but our life? How do we open up our creative process to its fullest potential? All of these tools are available to us. And when we give God, spirit, mystery a chance, we give ourselves the best chance to live our fullest, funnest, most creative, most outrageous life possible. So I'm incredibly excited to introduce Kim Krans. All right, here we are, Kim.
We're here.
We're here. We're doing it. And on our table in front of us, we've picked 4 cards from your archetype deck, leading us through a story. But before we explore this story about the shaman, the mountain, the mask, and Kairos, I want to talk about what the hell is a deck and how did you make it and what caused you to have the impulse to make these oracle decks in the first place.
First, thank you for having me, Aubrey. I'm so psyched about where we're going to go. We're going to start with the decks, but then we're going to go
for sure
far out. I'll start with the origin of the tarot deck, which was back in 2012. It was a self-publish, which a lot of people don't know, but I drew the tarot deck because I couldn't find a deck that I loved. I've been a maker of drawings and a lover of symbols since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And when I tried to find a deck that carried the resonance of the concepts of the cards, I was like, these are falling flat for me. A lot of the classic decks that I now love, but it was that lack of that really drove me to make the deck in the beginning. And then I made the deck. I printed 1,000 copies as, on my own, just out of my art studio, and shipped them out to people. And the first 1,000 sold, and the second 1,000 sold, and then on and on and on. And I was kind of the guardian of that deck. I had a feeling it was going to go really wide from the beginning. I could tell what was happening just on social media. It was like the same time that Instagram was really like blasting off, and people were interacting with the cards and posting them.
And so this is the classic tarot,
yeah, exactly.
78 cards, right?
The thing about the tarot as opposed to oracle decks is such a good question, and people don't always understand this distinction. The tarot deck is set. It's 78 specific cards. It's not up for, interpretation of what cards you draw or don't draw. It's a system. No
remixes available.
Exactly. And then with the following 3 decks, those didn't have systems. So I drew the tarot deck. It did really well. And then I was like, wait, why is this doing so well? Was basically my question. Like, what's fueling this? And a lot of people responded to the deck because it had so many animals in it. instead of people, that can sometimes allow people to separate from the image of like, oh, that's not me. I'm not that age. I'm not that race. I'm not that person.
Or even that sex.
Exactly. So the creatures get us out of that mindset and into a more symbolic realm and an intuitive realm. So that's when I drew.
Because us woo-woo people will much rather be a wolf than try to be somebody of a different age than us.
Exactly. We can't cross that barrier.
Yeah, no. That's too hard. That's the limit of our spirituality
even
right
if
there.
They have the wrong shoes.
Yeah, I can be a bear.
They're like, I don't wear those kind of shoes, actually. Like, I'm not like a goddess.
I'm not a shorts person, but I'm totally am I a muskrat person for 100%.
That is exactly what we're so into what we are not. And then we become like super niche and super separated from everybody. Even our friends, like, I don't wear Jordans, you know? Like,
yeah.
Okay. So then I drew the animal spirit deck. And then I was still like, but what is fueling this? What's the underlying force? I was thinking about it if it was a car. Like, if the tarot is a Jag, like you're driving it. Well, what's the engine of this system? And that's when I started to study depth psychology and learn about the archetypes. And I was like, oh shit, the engine of the tarot is archetypes. It's 78 really honed archetypes that have been selected over time by the people, for the people. And if certain archetypes aren't that resonant for all people, they're eventually going to drift out of the what is now the 78 tarot cards. So then I made the archetypes deck. And then I was like, but what's underneath the archetypes? Like, what's fueling those forces? Mm-hmm. And then I started to study alchemy. And I was like, oh, the elements, if you think about the car, there's the spark in the engine is igniting. So there's always drawing back to the pure elements in a certain arrangement, create an archetype, and then that takes its shape in the world. So that is really kind of a map as to how the 4 decks came to be, the last one being the alchemy deck. And it's interesting to think about the archetypes if you drop into like the warrior archetype in your mind, in your imagination. Thinking about that arrangement of elements, like what does the warrior have in terms of fire? Like what kind of fire does the warrior have? How much water is there? It's not that much water. A little bit, but not that much. There's strong earth and there's a lot of like...
And the beautiful part is this is up for everybody's individual interpretation.
Exactly.
Right? Like, so I have a strong affinity and spiritual identification with the dragon. So then I've had to understand and extrapolate, all right, what is dragon fire for me? Like, exactly. And a breath that I can use as dragon fire, what does that breath do? Is it a breath to destroy? Well, destroy only that which is ready to be destroyed, but to heal all things that are underneath it. It's not like in the movies where like Daenerys says, Dracarys, and everything's fucking laid to waste. It's like, no. The dragon fire of this archetype for me is it sets all things right. So if a delicate flower, needs nourishment, the dragon fire will help the flower nourish, right? Like, it's like, this is the image that I have, which is probably contrary to a lot of different archetypal understandings of that. But there's permission within it to interpret based upon what you desire and your own imagination.
Exactly. And it gets super subtle and nuanced. So like, to go back to the warrior and correct myself around water, on the battlefield, the warrior doesn't really need the water so much, but after the battle, if the warrior is not weeping with their fellow warriors, is a problem.
Yes.
So
indeed.
It's like learning how and when, just like you're saying, to like understand the elements in a deeper way and say like, well, now I need to engage this and now I need to allow this one in. And then if you look through any of the archetypes, it's just kind of like an interesting exercise to say like, well, what is the mother's fire? And you think about the womb, it's like that slow 9 months of warmth. That's really different than like the arrow that has the fire that's like lit. That's going to,
Yeah, totally. There's another whole element to this, which is the picking of the cards. And one thing that, our sister Caitlin says, which I think is a beautiful sentence, is, give God a chance. And So whatever your beliefs, and there's so many words for God, universe, source, spirit, Wakan, we're here with our native brothers. There's so many names for this force, but we all have this sense. Matthias de Stefano calls it the weaver. But we have this sense that there's this guiding force in our life that opens up synchronicities and creates possibilities. And in the picking of these cards, like one of the things that's brought me to tears over and over as I've used different oracle decks is the precision and specificity about which card I pick at which point, which I can only, through all of my experience, describe as there's something happening with spirit through me in the picking of the cards that's actually opening up a possibility for me in my life. And I'm well aware of the Barnum effect. I'm well aware that we'll try to make anything, like any reading, like you could pick up any astrological reading, and if you want it to be about you, it can be about you. You can pick up any card and the mind can make a story about it. But there's some times where things just hit in such a precise way that you can only just laugh or cry.
Yeah. It's honestly, it's annoying to me how it does that. Like as the maker of the thing, like I still think that the decks shouldn't like call me out. I'm like, I made this thing, I know it. In some ways, it's like a product in my life. Like it's a creative work, but it's also been this thing that's like part of my career, So I can have a very distant relationship to that synchronicity that you're talking about, which is like the other that comes in. And it's like you welcome it and you're like, okay, show me something that I don't know right now. Show me what I need to see. And I'm like humbled time and time again by it. Like, how does this work? Like, what?
Yeah, right.
And I don't even pull from decks that often because it's just an intense experience for me as like the maker of the thing,
Right.
I'm
sure.
It's a lot.
But we did it anyways.
We did it.
And I want to definitely, I want to plant a seed that we're going to get back to the creative process for you, because you have really mastered the ability to take these things that come into the imaginal realm of your mind and then make them concrete and available and also successful. And which is also why we invited you to be a coach for Creatively Fit and Fit for Service for next trimesters, because you're a master at this. And I have some of those talents and capabilities as well. I've produced many things, but that ability to take something from the imaginal to the physical. But I want to plant a seed for that and then stick with the deck and the story for now, knowing that we're going to get back to there for anybody who's curious about, all right, I have these ideas. How do I do like Kim did or do like Aubrey did and take these ideas and make them into something that can actually impact the world? So we're going to plant that seed.
Okay.
And then we're going to go into the story that we created in pulling from your deck right here.
Okay.
All right. So the first card, we split this up. And the first card, it was my pull. Second card was yours. Third card was mine. Fourth card was yours. But however, Spirit was probably pulling through both of us if we were open in the right way.
Exactly.
And created a story. So the shaman is where we begin our story. So I'll ask you first, what is your relationship to the shaman within yourself and also in the greater world? What's your relationship to the shaman?
That's
power.
Was that my relationship to the shaman just then? I was like,
there's some theories about this. Well,
still rolling.
We were doing great.
I know. We're off to a great start.
We were really in it.
We were in the pocket. So I just asked you what your relationship to the shaman was, and then the whole power for the whole house just goes and powers down. So, I appreciate that. You showing off a little bit and really trying to express the power of the shaman, but let's keep the power on. Other things, like strong winds, whatever other tricks you have, let's just chill on that. Let's use words. Words to communicate.
I was trying to go nonverbal. I'm like, I can call my people in right now. It's cool. You haven't met my people yet, but they're here.
Well, I'm getting introduced. Mad respect. Deep bow.
Oh, wow. What I was going to say is I think the shaman is the one who sings. And the one who sings and keeps singing, and they know their song, and they hold that song, the holy song, whatever form that is. It doesn't have to be literally music, but that is part of their craft. They've honed their craft through daily repetition, and they're just waiting for the sacred at any point to come in and welcoming it into the field. And then they can, really precisely, really accurately move sound, move energy through whatever their craft is. And I mean that like really broadly. Mm-hmm. Like I see the art of shamanism in almost any like high caliber, whomever, whether they're speaking or they're dancing or they're throwing a football or whatever it is that they're doing. Mm-hmm. They typically have a bird's eye view, and they've honed their craft to such a degree that the actual kind of grit of their work is unfolding as they can hold a bird's eye view of the energetics of the space.
Right. I think that's really well said. And another way to talk about the song, you could talk about the word, and the word is the logos, and the logos is the truth. And so I think at the core of any shaman, they carry a truth about the nature of the cosmos, even if they don't describe it in an ontology that's, their own there's cosmological ontology of that which is real in the whole universe, but they feel it as it moves through their own body, and they understand the nature of that truth, and then they're applying it. At least that's for the benevolent shamans, because
exactly.
There's also the sorcerer, which is the inversion of that, someone who actually is tapped into the anti-life, anti-value energy, or the corruption of service to self instead of service to other. But the true shaman, the word, the logos, moves through them, and it can move through them through touch or through sound or through word or through song. Yeah. In some way, they're able to apply that to affect a person or a space or even a sacred object in a way that actually informs it with the intelligence that they carry inside.
Exactly. It's a really good clarification that it's a true sound. It's a benevolent, it carries that resonance. And I mean, my first drawing teacher was, I didn't know it at the time, I was 15, but she was a total Jedi. And she taught the craft of drawing and basically promised me, if you draw every day for an extended period of time without a break, with devotion in your heart, the line will wake up. And when it wakes up, it will want to move. Mm. And people will feel the resonance, not even consciously. They won't even be able to articulate it likely, but they will sense that something's living in the symbol, in the image, in the line, in your handwriting, in your name when you draw it. And once that line, this is the real part that gets me. The second part is, once the line comes to life, the task of the artist is to follow the line. Mm. And the life becomes in service of that movement and that intelligence. And that's always stayed with me as like a marker of, I'm still trying to wake up the line even more. And I think that's somewhat what people respond to in the decks is like, that promise is in me. Her own, shamanic practice of drawing is also in me. She passed it to me without me really knowing. Mm. I was like a teenager, I just wanted to listen to tunes and like make out. I mean, she wanted me drawing. I drew every day, 3 hours with her. Mm-hmm. And 1 hour of figure drawing where you're drawing from observation, you're drawing the body and you're trying to understand like the planes of the shoulders and the bend of the chin and the shapes and defining everything. And I'm like, this is so intense. But it was that like rigorous practice of just the promise that someday it will wake up.
Yeah. There's such an interesting concept around, I apprenticed with my brother Porangi in his bodywork style, which he's learned and also cultivated through a lifetime of mastery. And I was really blessed with this opportunity to study with him on how to actually learn his way of bodywork. And what was interesting, one thing about it is whenever I would thank him, because in the process, even before that, receiving from him, I'd be like, Porangi, that was incredible. And he was like, Oh, well, that was spirit moving through me, and that was all the guides and helpers and angels. And he fully understood that he was just actually a vessel for something greater than him. And that's the idea of the hollow bone. But then sometimes people think of the hollow bone and they forget that, yes, it's the hollow bone, but you've crafted and carved that bone in a particular way, like a master flute maker has carved the flute in such a way that the sound can come through from spirit, from the mystery, in such a way that it makes the most beautiful, harmonious music. So it's also the dedication and the work. Yes, you empty yourself out to allow spirit to come through, but you also create a vessel that allows spirit to animate you through the dedication and diligence and practice. And you can't have one without the other. And so a lot of, new kind of, I would say almost wannabe shamans, they'll be like, I'm a hollow bone. It's just spirit moving through you. But like, yeah, but how much have you practiced? Like, how much have you honed your craft? Like, what type of hollow bone are you? Is there still some meat hanging off this side? And like, did you actually carve this in a way that it's precise? And so it's both. It's both spirit moving through you, and it's the diligence to actually hone your craft.
Exactly. You could say this in the art world too with the artists. They want that, download or channeling, or they want that right away. But the real work is to just tend to the craft, whatever it is, if you're playing the piano, or it's showing up for that practice and making yourself available to the other. We've kind of been talking about this since the beginning of the conversation, is like that other force that comes in and wants to move through. And another thing that people don't talk about, especially when it comes to the creative aspect of being able to hold that force once it starts to move through. It's like, yeah, I want to be a hollow bone. Yeah, I want to just draw what I feel and be a channel for the divine. When you wake up the creative force, like my teacher was suggesting, it wants to go somewhere. And it's also magnetic. So other people start turning towards you and they want it to be satiated. Mm-hmm. And also, you're going to have to leave things behind that you're comfortable with in order to follow the line, so to speak. So that gets really dicey, and there's not the support, in our society or teachings even around how to support the artist when things start to actually wake up in them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, also one of the reasons why you've felt the call to teach and step in for however long that is to actually help people with this process, because there's just a paucity of information and good education that exists in our world. Like what we're taught in school is just a joke to me. It's a joke. What should we be taught? How to breathe, how to create art, how to think, how to reason, how to communicate with each other in the right way, how to listen, like basic fundamental things about being a human is not actually what we're able to learn. So now we have alternative means and methods to help ourselves understand like how to actually human being.
Yeah. It's like even, after 8 years of art school in New York and really great art schools, and I still didn't learn how to be, how about this one? Being an artist with other artists, like a team, instead of the solo artist alone painting who's competitive with all the other painters that are actually like their family and they haven't figured that out yet. Mm-hmm. Like that is a devastating position we put the artist in, I think, culturally, and it's really tricky to get out of that mindset because they're all competing for, the gallery or the exhibition or the curator or whatever.
Yeah. And at the same time, they're praising this almost meme of the starving artist.
Yeah.
And it's like they're glorifying, oh yeah, I'm starving, struggling artist. And that becomes their own badge of honor.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, yeah, no, I'm an artist and I'm pure in that. And I want a whole bunch of people to listen to my songs. And I want a whole bunch of people to read my book. And that's okay. That's beautiful. Of course you do. If you have beautiful art is medicine. Of course you want that. And so they put that in the shadow And when that's in the shadow, then they're not actually aligned with their art and their purpose in that way. It's just like, if you're an artist, yeah, you want people to see your art. For the most part, sometimes you may be doing it just for yourself as your own cathartic process. But I think there's also a danger to having your ambition in that way, which can come from a super pure place. But putting that in the shadow is also another pitfall and trap that people can get in.
There's so many traps. Like, there's the artist alone, no resources, creative energy coming through them, magnetism, money, if there's magnetism, and there's all these traps.
Yeah.
And it's just like that is one of my main missions, is to like get in there with the artists. First of all, you're not alone. Second of all, the creative force is moving through. You asked it to, and now how are we going to cope with that? So we got to work with the nervous system a little bit. We got to like start to support. We got to find some friends and people that we can be with as we grow and move. And then how do we deal with all the traps and all of these archetypes and shadows and, unresolved narratives that we have about the artist?
Yeah. And look, the first card is the shaman. Same thing.
Yeah,
there
exactly.
are so many traps.
There's so many traps.
And this is something like, one of the big traps is, and Don Howard, who's one of my teachers, and his lineage was the Shaman lineage, and he was a Wachumero. And, he would talk to me about every person on this path will have to confront the seduction of the path of power. Because as you open up your capabilities, there will be a seduction to use the power that you've cultivated for your own gain. Maybe it's the seduction of a partner that you have. And I've seen this happen where somebody's used their medicine and their, kind of shamanic capabilities to actually harvest or grab someone's attention or seduce them in some way. And that's the seduction of the path of power. And all real shamans, he said, have to confront the seduction of the path of power and resist it. They have to rebuke that deal that comes from the devil that says you could have so much power.
Yeah. The power is a big game. Once you awaken it, you have to like grapple with that.
Everybody has to deal with it. And then there's also the competence trap, right? Like some people, they take, I had an experience with someone who is supposedly an apprentice of a lineage of shamans. And he'd had a powerful transformational experience with this medicine. And then he thought, okay, now I can go out and offer this medicine, but he didn't have the competency. And, he crippled a brother of mine because he served the medicine in the wrong way. And he caused so much damage because he wasn't fit to serve. Actually, at that point, he overestimated his own competency, which can happen even for someone who's just a regular psychonaut. They overestimate their ability to hold the medicine, and then something breaks in their psyche, and it can take years or maybe never to recover from that. So there's traps in all of these practices and vocations that someone might have.
There's also, we could go on and on about the traps. It's like, it's really a miracle to me that the shamans are still singing because there's so many traps, and the artists are still making things, that the song is still living and being created at any given moment. Because there's also the trap of like just ridicule, of really being the one to cherish the song and to keep chanting the song and to keep honoring the traditions and upholding that. I'm thinking of like the last morning in the most recent plant medicine ceremony that I did, and waking up just at that dawn hour and watching the taita move through the space, singing, and just thinking, my God, I'm so glad that he never stopped singing. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure he met, points in his life when he could have made the decision, this is too hard. It's too much. Like, look what people say, bringing this to the States, and there's just so many complexities that the shaman is facing. But to carry the song, I just felt in that moment like, my God, I am so glad that every juncture he made it through, and that the song is reaching me now.
Yeah. Hallelujah.
It's such a blessing.
Hallelujah. Indeed. And this actually is, for me, a powerful segue into the mountain. Because the mountain stays and it plants itself. And we're right now at the foot of Bear Mountain, which is the highest peak in the Sedona area. And it's this powerful mountain. And it's more than a mountain, it's a being. And it's watching over us, and it watches over our land. And whenever I feel like the chaos is going to overwhelm me, or it's too much, or I can't withstand the storm, I think about and I look out to Bear Mountain, and Bear Mountain can withstand any storm. It just stays strong and planted and inviting for people to climb and see a higher vantage point. You know, very much like a shaman, it's an invitation to see from a higher perspective. But the fundamental nature of the mountain is the perseverance and the steadiness to just hold.
Yeah, this is a missing energy from the artist's life for sure. I mean, if you think about what's the stabilizing force in the artist's life, or like, you know, you could put anyone that's awakened the energy of their craft, an athlete, whatever. There's so many ups and downs so fast. I mean, you can go from standing on the stage, singing a song that you wrote when you're by yourself. You're singing in front of whatever, 5, 6, 7,000 people. Lights, everyone, adoration, magnetism, it's all happening. And then 45 minutes later, you rap backstage and you're in your hotel room and you're solo. If you don't have family with you, if you don't have a partner with you, you're solo in the hotel room after you've just gone from that peak experience. And if you don't have something that's holding you, like a greater force and a nervous system that's aware of the fact, I just went from that to this. And now I feel the vacancy and the loneliness when all those people were connecting with me. Like, we've got to give the tools that can help the person in that moment, because that's when the shit goes down, is like the hotel room.
Totally.
After the grace, after all the glory.
Yes, indeed. The down climb.
Yeah, it's
the down climb.
Totally. It's the, what do you call it? When you go up too high and you get...
I don't know, like Icarus though.
It is Icarus-ish. I was thinking more like altitude sickness, when you come down too fast and I don't know what happens, but...
Well, I think you're thinking maybe of the bends when you ascend too fast from going underneath the water scuba diving. That's where you get the real problems, and you get the bends, and then you're all fucked up. You got to go into hyperbaric oxygen and figure yourself out.
I mean, nature is like such a teacher in this way. Like, it literally happens if you go up and down too high. So like, why do we expect that humans can do that in a day, in a couple of hours?
Especially
and, like,
without the support. So the internal elements in nature of the mountain. And then, as you mentioned, the external, what is the bedrock?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this question, and then I'll answer it for myself as well. What is the bedrock of the mountain? What is the foundation that you have both internally and also externally that actually helps ground you and support you through any different storm that you might be in?
I have both really kind of hilarious physical practice that I do, like secretly, in the moment when I need it. And then I also have an image of my first like experience with like benevolence that came to me when I was riding in the car with my grandpa and my mom from the movies, and we had just watched Last of the Mohicans. And my grandfather is incredibly racist. He was incredibly racist. He worked for the Michigan State Police during the race riots in Lower Michigan. And he was saying horrible things about the movie, like as if there wasn't enough violence in the movie. He felt there should have been more. And I don't remember what year that movie came out, but I was leaning my head against the window. And I was most struck that my mom wasn't saying anything. She wasn't saying like, yo, don't say that in front of my kids. Or like, you know, she was just driving the car and my grandpa was just going on and on. And I felt this presence come into the car and said to me, it was a woman, it was just like benevolent presence. Kim, this is not the world. You will discover the world. Mm. And I knew at that point, like, I'm just in this car right now with my family. And at some point, I will be with people that are going to hold reverence for different cultures and different types of people, different ages, different mindsets. And knowing that that could come to me as like a little kiddo in a car in Michigan, the Oldsmobile, like driving down the road, I know that that's like with me all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, when I'm in a sticky place, it's like, this is not the whole world. It's gonna expand, and it will be able to hold the bigger forces and bigger graces. So that's with me all the time. And then just to follow up on the physical practice, I'm a big believer in the pelvic floor, and I am.
Yep.
And it will ground you as everyone should, like, in my opinion, just to go back to the school that should exist. I'm like, yo, can we just talk about the pelvic floor for a second? Mm-hmm. Because we need to get grounded. We need to be able to, at any moment, be like, whoa, I'm barely here. Kegels, like, engage pelvic floor, draw with the exhale, come back into the body, and then, get back here. Everyone wants to go so far out with shamanism, with their experiences, with drawing and artwork and whatever. But I think the real mastery is like awareness that you're out, come back at any moment, and then know what you came back with. Mm-hmm. And just to go back to the improv comedy show that we did the other day, Question Master, we were standing in line right before you and I faced off. I was doing Kegels.
That's why you beat me. I did none.
You weren't doing Kegels.
None.
Next time. We'll see.
But I don't have a vagina. How do I do a Kegel?
No, men can still do it too.
Yeah.
It's an engagement of the base of the body. You're just saying come back home.
I know that. I know that already. But I just didn't do it.
Yeah. No,
I'm trying to make an excuse, but then you just busted me on my excuse. Not only did you win the question master, you just busted me again. And actually, I know exactly how to do that, because that's actually the spasms that create ejaculation for men is because of the PC muscle that starts to go into spasm. So if you actually train yourself to be able to control and contract the PC muscle, you can prevent yourself from ejaculating. So you can do that with manually. So this is obviously getting into a totally tangential topic.
This is important. This is a class in the school that we
well,
create.
for sure.
It's
so there's
like...
there's this legend of what the Taoist tantric masters, they called it the $1 million spot. And what that means is that if you are about to ejaculate, you can apply physical pressure to the PC muscle to prevent it from spasming. So people who are having premature ejaculation problems, apparently the rumor is that somebody paid $1 million to understand the secret, and the tantric Taoist master was like, okay, cool, here it is. You just put some pressure on this, or you use your heel if you're sitting on it and there's someone's on top of you, there's a way. But the better way is to actually train that muscle to be strong enough that you can actually hold it in a contracted state so it won't spasm when you want to ejaculate.
I mean, this stuff is a big deal. It's like how we also age well. Like there's so many things that can come from just like having a relationship to that part of the body. And also like, I mean, to me, it's one of the like survival skills. Like, there's a woman at the gym, at the boxing studio, having a panic attack in the bathroom. I heard her crying. It's just like, hold my hand, tell me your name, and squeeze your glutes. Squeeze your glutes, tell me your name. And then just come back in the body, back in the body, back in the body. And there's such a, I understand, but there's such a desire to go out and to escape.
Right. Yeah. All things in balance. You have to, as far as you want to go out, you have to have equally strengthened the practices of how to come back.
Yeah.
And that's, again, the mountain energy. What is your mountain? And for everybody to know. And I think for what you said about, benevolence with a capital B, that faith in God, I'm comfortable with that word God, and I'm here to help reclaim it and clean it off of all the barnacles and all of the mischaracterizations that have come from it. That's part of my path. So I'm comfortable with the word God. I understand that some people listening might not be, and I totally respect that. But for me, my relationship to God is a huge part of the mountain for me. And then on the other side it's the bedrock of the relationships that I have, and the devotion and the friendship and the allyship. Like all of these beads that I'm wearing around my necklace represent those people that I feel like I can count on no matter what. When my father passed away, I sent out a text to every single person immediately on my beaded necklace, and without hesitation, no matter where they were in the world, no matter how famous they were or what they had going on, they're like, we'll be there. We'll be there. And they were there. And they showed right up, and I can count on them as allies. And so when I'm alone, it's only because I haven't made the effort to reach out. So it's these relationships. It's why this is like my most sacred object, because it symbolizes the relationships that I have. Each one of these beads is a different person. And so the allies and the friendships, and then also those particularly special, intimate relationships that are just built on devotion, where it's like, like you got me no matter what, like you got me no matter what. And those relationships have saved me countless times, because I do go far out, and I do have, strong practices and faith and ice baths and cold plunges and sweat lodges and things that ground me. I have all the practices, breath, all the different things that I can do. But sometimes I just need the love and allyship and support of those that are close to me. And to know that I have that at all times is what gives me the safety to be able to journey far. Without that, I would have been lost already. Honestly, it would have been, I've needed people to bring me back many, many times.
It's such a big deal. I think that's why Fit for Service is a big deal.
Yeah.
Because it's like really leaning into the community and the support. And I do think it's so uncommon for artists. I remember when I first started playing in a band, and I was on tour with the band in the van with the dudes, and we had this really shitty show in Kansas City or something. And I had mostly I'm pretty lone wolf. Like, I have that in me for sure. Practice, get up early, do my thing. I kind of like can't find my people, So I'm like, okay, I'll do it on my own. I'll draw by myself. I'll put out the deck by myself. I'll do all this stuff by myself. It's fine. It's, DIY, and that's great. But I remember being in the van after this shitty show in Kansas City. We got in the van, and everyone's like, fuck Kansas City. Like, fuck that. Let's like drive all the way to Denver. And we're going to like, there was this ability to like take what had just occurred, and I didn't have to hold it on my own or take it personally or anything. It was like this group morale around me. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting in the van being like, I have never experienced this before. I've never felt just the group holding me as an artist. And I just witnessed how shitty the sound was on the mic, and how it was really, I was struggling through the whole show. And then I was thinking, wow, every artist, every discipline has its own sense of team or not. The tennis player versus like, the basketball player.
Right.
Post game, very different scene.
Yeah.
And you have to like know that again, and like set your support system so that you have them in place.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that is one of the genesis of Fit for Service. Was I was in a Wachuma ceremony with Don Howard, and I showed up with a couple friends, but we had probably another 12 people who were there in the ceremony with us. And after going through that initiation, the Wachuma Masada, it was called, which is going through the lower world, the middle world, the upper world, in the ancient Chavin traditions that Don Howard was blessed to carry forward. We all became so close. We had a WhatsApp thread, and, it's still not going right now, but it stayed for a long time. And if I ever saw one of those other people, and some of them have shown up actually in Fit for Service later, but I was just sitting there with Dr. Dan, who's also one of the beads on my necklace, and was like, man, if we could create something, and I don't want to do psychedelics because I can't recommend psychedelics to anybody at all. Psychedelics are a personal choice, but there's initiatory practices that I can recommend to everybody, like breath work and ecstatic dance. And if we can bond a group together through initiatory practices, go through stuff together, we can build friendships and alliances, and that's going to be really profound. And it took 4 more years for me to figure out how to cultivate the fit for service container, but that seed was planted based on the idea of how quickly over a week's time we could form like long, deep, lasting friendships with different people and create bonds. And that's what we've seen over and over again with Fit for Service. The 2018 Fit for Service crew, they're still hanging out. They're still gathering. They're still in business partnerships together and still doing things. It's because they sweat together. They cried together. They went through, so they learned together. They served together. It's a big deal.
But Aubrey, it's also because of you. Like you have a real gift in that particular capacity. And I know this from the first breathwork session that I did with Fit for Service. And at the end of it, I was sitting up and I opened my eyes and you were there sitting across from me. And basically, like, just to say this, if any other dude was like sitting in my space like that, like right after breathwork, I would have been like, yo, like, why are you in my space? Mm-hmm. But I could tell immediately by your eyes, like we were sharing a horizon line at that point.
Yeah.
And you were witnessing me. And we had an exchange, we exchanged some words, and you said something like, I see your light. Mm-hmm. And I said, thank you for not turning away. And that was the first time I felt that type of holding of space from a man that was witnessing and just supporting, holding the horizon line of what was next and not turning away. Mm-hmm. And that gift is like incredible. And that runs through Fit for Service and the other work that you do, and it runs through the people that are in Fit for Service. But I'm telling you, that is a real gift, and it is rare, and it is so needed.
Mm. Thank you, sis. I really appreciate that, and I got emotional just thinking of that moment because, you know, that is one of those moments where there was, you know, in the breath work, it's a beautiful opportunity to really just listen and observe and see. And I have different moments with different people. And sometimes I don't have any moments with certain people. There's obviously many people in the space, but I was just really drawn to that. And I can't even recall, that was the first recollection of what I said, but I remember the moment and I remember that's what it was. It was to sit there as the mountain.
Yeah.
And to just see, and that not looking away is a key thing. It's a big part of my own lineage, as Rebbe Gafni talks about. So face to face with God is panimo panim, face to face. It's not looking away from the light. Sitra akra means turning of the face. And in the turning of the face, you're turning away from the light. You're turning away from the truth. You're turning away. And that's where all things fester and rot, is in the absence of your attention, which is also called hashgaha. It's the divine presence that doesn't look away. And, you know, that's me at my best. And I'm not always at my best.
I know, but
that's me at my best.
It's also that you verbalized it. Like this is why I got obsessed with boxing. The first time I ever boxed with someone and someone held the mitts for me, I just afterwards like went in my car and cried. I was like, I have never had someone just stand there and essentially ask me non-verbally, hit harder, get more clear. I want you to get more clear, stronger, more precise, and more you. And I'm going to stand here and hold my ground while you do that. And that's why I went to boxing, you know, when I started 5-6 days a week, because I had never felt that mm-hmm. in my life from men. And I don't feel like I'm alone in saying that. This isn't like me and my story. It's like that is very common for people not to have that. It's why the lone wolf exists, because they're like, these folks don't want the light. So I'm actually going to go over here to like protect what I know I have inside. And I'll foster my gifts over here and wait to like find my crew. And so I had experienced it non-verbally, but then to feel that same dynamic with you and for you to say the words was like such a big step for me. That was the next step. And with that in mind, it like allows me to understand the masculine more and its potential to hold.
Yeah.
which if we can drop into that and not just keep like the sacred feminine or the sacred womb, but also think about like the sacredness of the man's pelvic floor and the man's like the whole shebang.
Yeah.
Bring equal amounts of sacredness to it. That I feel like then we can start to like get somewhere. At least I can start to get somewhere, because the progress that I felt since like my first boxing sesh and then that experience with you, I'm like, oh my God.
This, it's, we've mentioned the masculine nature and the mountain. And I actually have a poem that's coming out in my new book called Love to the Seventh Power. That's called A Man is a Mountain. And I think I would like to read it.
You have to read it.
All right. So, a mountain is a man. A man is a mountain. He is a bed for weary minds, a ladder for souls to climb, a haven for all the forsaken. He is a pilgrimage, a rite of passage, a wayfinder to God. Covered in snow, covered in grass, he grows in mass over time and lifetime. You push, he stays. You strike, he lays. You lash, he forgives. You curse, he laughs. You leave, he remains. You come, he welcomes. You belittle, he smiles. For what does a mountain have to prove? He has no scale to measure, no eyes to compare, no ego to defend. If you ask him what he is, he will reply, I am the rocks, the dirt, the air, and all the life in between. I am the first to greet the sun. I kiss the moon goodnight. Use the clouds as my clothes, wear the stars as adornment, sing through eagles' cries, and never, ever do I hide my size. A mountain is a man.
Wow. Thank you, Aubrey.
Yeah.
Did you plan that, like with this card?
Yeah, this is all part of my trick to get to that poem.
Okay, great. or the future seeing you wrote the poem for the.
I mean,
did you write one for the mask too?
Yeah, exactly. If I had poems for all of them, I think it would be highly sus.
I'd be like, all right, what's going on here?
I have a poem. It's called "The Mask is Disposable."
I have this other one.
Oh man!
I have a poem about Kairos. Yeah, by the way.
Oh boy!
Wow!
And that's, I think, one of the things that people are afraid of. People are afraid of that. Actually, I'm wearing a mask, and that actually I'm some cult leader trying to manipulate people and trying to extract, because they've seen that. They've seen the extractive masculine. And the world is filled with these ideas of it. They've seen so much of the negative that they project this on all people. And men, women have their own projections, but men in particular, they get projected upon them like, oh, what are you trying to get from me? How are you trying to trick me? What are you, you're just trying to, if it's involving like romantic or sexual relationships, how are you trying to trick me out of my clothes? How are you going to trick me into going to bed with you? Or if it's business, how are you going to trick me into giving your money? And yeah, that exists. And sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't. And that's real. And I think, one of the things that, I have been able to offer, and one of the reflections I get, is to help heal that wound for a lot of people who expect that.
Yeah. It's a big wound. It's exactly what I would have expected if there was like a dude sitting there.
Right.
Like staring at me after breath work. I'd be like, yo, what do you want?
Yeah. Right. Right. And I mean, I can imagine, as a woman, like you go into a social environment, and it doesn't even matter what social environment. It could be an ecstatic dance, which is supposed to be a safe place where everybody's freely expressing, but you go to and Fit for Service is good about this, but you go to some other ecstatic dance, like a local place that you're out, and you're cruising, and there's that slippery guy who's so going slippery to like ecstatic dance in your space and make like overly eye contact, and you're like, bro, come on, man. Like,
It's so
save
slippery.
your tricks for some other place.
Yeah, there's that, and then there's the turn away also is so brutal. Like that's what I've been more used to is like if I let the comedian me out of the bag, or like, you know, you go on a first date with someone and I'm always kind of like, how much of me am I going to let them see? Like how much intelligence, how much sexiness, like how much can they handle? There's something in me that I'm like gauging that, because usually the response that I'm used to is more like, whoa, like I actually can't. So then the gaze or the mask or whatever we're aimed at here in this next card turns away from the what it's witnessing. So I've really been thinking about the strength of the masculine strength is to stay with whatever is in front of them. It could be so radiant and brilliantly bright, or it could be so gnarly and dark and at its lowest point, but to just bear witness to what is without turning away is super powerful.
Yeah. And the highest level of that is to not only not turn away, but also learn the lesson between judgment and discernment. And I think this is a key element to what it is to carry the masculine, you know, with dignity and with honor, is to have your sword of discernment to say, no, this is not right, and this is right. And also resist the temptation to move into judgment. And the difference between judgment and discernment is judgment is saying, this thing is not worthy of love. Discernment is saying, not in my field, not in my space, or not in this world, potentially. Like, get thee behind me, Satan. Like, not today, not today. But also there's a deeper place of non-judgment of like, I understand why you exist, and I understand where you come from, the trauma that you were born out of, whatever that is. And so I'm not, as Paul Selig would say, placing you in a cave, because as soon as you judge someone else, you're judging some small aspect of yourself in the greatest expanse of who you are. That which you judge is a part of your greater self. And so you put yourself in the cave with them. You close off that chamber of your heart to yourself and to God when you judge. And we also need the discretion. It's like the rose is the perfect model of this for me. The rose gives its flower and its beauty and its scent to any, but it also has thorns. It says, you can't trample me.
Yeah.
Like, be mindful, you know? And so I've always tried to keep that symbol of the rose with me, of like, my flower's available for everyone, but there's thorns.
Yeah.
And like, you can't trample and destroy the flower.
Yeah. I think this awareness of that polarity is just, that's the game, is to know the fragrance of the rose and to know the sharpness of the thorn. With the bee, it's like the sting and the honey. You know, the mountain, you have the high peak and then you have the low when you come down. So to sort of know, like, where am I on this spectrum at any given moment? It's like, goes back to the shaman. To some degree, it's like the shaman actually knows their location. Like, that's one of their gifts that they've honed, is to know, like, where am I in the ordinary and non-ordinary? Do I need to tether back to the ordinary, to the material world right now at the table with Aubrey? Or how far out am I right now with my mind's eye?
Yeah. How do you be in Kairos, where we're going, and Chronos, which is like linear time and timeless time, which is another, you know, polar scale.
So how much time do you think we should give to the card called Kairos?
And there is the sword of discernment to figure that out. But we can't avoid the mask.
We can't. I tried
The mask is staring right at us here.
I tried to hop over it, but I did address it for 1 second, but it wasn't really
Well, we got to go deeper. We got to go deeper. So there's a lot to discuss with the mask. But first, let's get vulnerable. All right. Okay. So the shadow of the mask is when we're presenting something that isn't true, right? Like, we're presenting something that isn't real. And in some ways, the story that you were saying about, if you're hiding some of your intelligence, hiding some of your humor, hiding some of your, you know, erotic magnetism, that's a mask. Yeah. And it's a mask to make people feel comfortable with you. So that's one thing that you offered as a potential place where you might wear a mask. And it's not that isn't the right choice at that point, but it is a mask, and it never really feels good to wear the mask.
No, I have a first date mask for sure. It's not my favorite mask, but it doesn't even seem to be working that well. But
Yeah. So where else do you experience the shadow of the mask? And we'll talk about the light side of the mask as well.
Well, I also think we could go back to the shaman for a second and say that the shadow of the shamanic mask is over performance of what is ceremonial or what is sacred, and how to sort of enact that without, most of the shamans that are the most like legit that I've met in my time, like across different lineages, they're so chill in one side.
Totally.
And then they're also like, there's joy.
Yeah.
And then when it comes time, like,
they get into it. We're doing a documentary on Maestro Alberto Davila, and he's a master of the mestizo ayahuasquero lineage. And he tells a funny story of when he was asked one time to put on this ceremonial regalia that he said somebody ordered from China. And he was like, the fuck are you talking about? Because he's straight to business. It's just, he's one of the most powerful shamans I've ever known. But he shows up in his baseball cap.
yeah.
And he shows up in his normal little collared shirt and his jeans. And, and then he does his work and he says, there you go. I'm off. And then, he's just doing exactly who he is and what he is. And any of this, let me put on the ceremonial regalia. I mean, he's earned whatever ceremonial regalia he wants. Like, go for it, bro. But he doesn't want to wear that. He doesn't have power amulets and things. And I love sacred objects, and I'm a big fan of all that. And I really appreciate the ceremonial regalia. And you can bring that in. And obviously we're here with Chase Iron Eyes, and it was so powerful to see him in the ceremonial regalia that he's earned. And also there's a place where it's like, yeah, you don't need that. You don't need any of that.
Yeah.
Like it can become a mask. It can become part of a performance rather than the truth, and trusting the truth of who you are.
Yep. And at the same time, the shaman knows when more theatrics is needed to move the spirit where it needs to move, or move the psyche, the imagination, whatever it is, whether it's like, the feather here, blow here, chant loud, and now quiet and whisper. Like, they are super aware of like how the theatrics are also woven into the practice.
Mm-hmm. There's an interesting thing that I've meditated on. So there's some shamans who they will work on an extraction process, right? So chupar is one of the extraction processes, and it's a process of sucking, and it's sucking out the negative energy and you purge it. And I've watched this happen in a variety of ways, and it usually just comes out as coughing or purging or some other thing. But there's a certain practice that certain shamans have where they will do a magic trick. And I know it's a magic trick. Some people know it's real, and I know there's people listening now like, no, it's real. I was like, look, I've been around stage magicians. Like, I understand how slick they are, especially you're in an altered state of consciousness. Like, it's not hard to conjure something out of your hand when you're wearing sleeves. Like, this is not, I've been around David Blaine, he came to my 40th birthday party and did some crazy shit, but he's not producing cards out of thin air, it's a trick. But they'll pull a fish bone out of someone's neck, and like, now your voice is clear. And I know it's a trick. And so it wouldn't work on me. No one's ever tried it on me, but it wouldn't work on me. But the people that have had that trick done to them, they have this thing of like, and then they have this fishbone. It's like, I am healed. And I'm wondering, I'm like, is that crossing the line? Or is that just harnessing this super powerful placebo effect? And are they knowing that they're doing a trick, but doing it for the right reason? And it's an interesting gray area for me.
It's super interesting. I mean, to go back to the idea of the spectrum of like the performing shaman and the shaman with a performing mask, let's say, and then the shaman in the whatever baseball cap or something. And I would say that I would like to just like blanketly trust all the shamans, but it's a little dodgy out there.
Yes.
But I would like to say that the shaman knows that particular person needs a little bit more activation of their psyche or imaginal realm, that it's like, oh, I actually had to have evidence of the thing coming out, where like, I don't need that. I would,
Right.
I mean, that would make me feel like I didn't have the experience, that I was imagining the experience.
Totally.
But I think there's just different psyches need different things at different moments. And that's really the skill of the shaman, is to be able to run that spectrum and know, like, this person actually needs the whole thing spelled out for them. Like, they need to
Yeah.
see the...
Yeah, they
And-
need that compelling evidence, because their way
Exactly.
their mind works.
Exactly.
And so that is the golden interpretation of that
Yeah.
of that craft. And I agree. I think that's quite possible. And so that's why it's interesting. And also, it could be, I've also seen it used in other ways, where this, quote, shamans have conjured some little pill. And my stepmother's a Chinese medicine doctor, so I know what all of these pills look like. And they're some kind of, I don't know, Eleuthero or ginseng or some shit like that. And then they'll have this special pill they'll conjure out of thin air, and they'll give it to somebody and say, you can have this pill, but this is just sacred pill from spirit, and it'll be 10 grand.
Yeah.
And like, I've watched people pay the money, and I'm like, no, don't. Like, what are you doing? You're getting swindled.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, like, just this question of, when does God show up in that equation?
Yeah.
Like, even to go back to the tarot cards. I mean, I never thought I would be known as like a tarot card, artist. Like, I'm an artist that drew this series of decks, but I'm in this sort of genre where people are like, this card is, means all, and it's revealing so much knowledge to me. And sometimes I'm like, no, just, you don't even need the card. Like, we don't need, even this feels theatrical in some ways. But the idea is, at any given moment, you need something to like potentially move the imagination where it hasn't been yet. And who are we to say, maybe the pill, we don't know what the pill did for the person.
It's true.
I mean,
It's true. It's holding all of our ideas tenderly, and
Yeah.
also like being able to. And I think that's also the beauty of a mind that's inherently has some balance of skepticism.
yeah.
Like, and that's one thing I always encourage, is to hold all of your visions and hold all of these prophecies or oracular messages that you get, like, hold them lightly.
Exactly.
And just, if it feels true and feels right, follow them audaciously. However, still, have the humility to know that we're all fallible.
Yeah, this is why I'm so glad that I grew up on a farm in Michigan. Because, like, my dad's a truck driver, and my mom was an elementary school secretary at my school. And somehow I got into esoterica, pretty early. But my mom's pretty open-minded, but everything I learned from whatever tradition or any super woo-woo stuff, I'm always tracking, like, but is this working? Like, what's the data here? Like, when you're on the farm, you can hear all kinds of esoteric stuff about like how to get the fields to produce the most hay, but like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yep.
So in a lot of practices, I have that gauge always in my mind of like sort of tracking, collecting data and evidence of like, what's the most useful way to do this? And I think that the cards that I've made and the work that I've done, I think benefits from that really skeptical stream in me.
Mm-hmm.
That I think is potentially part of my mask too.
Mm-hmm.
Is I'm in the new age world, and people assume all kinds of things about my beliefs, and I'm like, I'm a fucking farm girl. Like, I was on the tractor, like
Right.
early on the 4-wheeler, like, playing basketball in the driveway, and like just working,
Yeah.
like from super young. So if I was raised with new age parents, which I fantasized about, like, these parents I should have had, I don't even know if my work would be that useful, because that polarity pulls me back all the time.
Yeah, it's a phrase that Chris Williamson shares a lot, and he just asked, does it grow corn?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, does it grow corn? Oh, that's cool. Does it grow corn? How useful is that idea in your life? And I think that's always an important question to ask.
To go back to the pelvic floor.
Yeah.
I mean, it fucking works.
It grows corn.
It works. It grows corn.
So, all right. So for me with the mask, I think, there's what I call our identity structure. I call it the player, and the player is designed to play a game. And when you actually know that you're playing the game, you can put on a mask for that game. And that game could be the game of improv. And so let's say, or I was in a commedia dell'arte and I wore a mask and I performed. And so I was the character Bargello. And now is Bargello Aubrey? No. But when I was Bargello, in some ways I was more Aubrey than I ever was. There was something that was moving through me, even though I was performing, that was actually the most me. And I think a lot of actors and comedians, they'll know that like, yeah, I'm performing, I'm wearing a mask, but there's something actually underneath that performance that's really true. And so I think this idea that if you're performing, it's not you. No. It's still you underneath that performing, but all that's required is a little bit of awareness.
Yeah.
And the awareness that, all right, I'm in this performance. But when you're locked into a character and we're, sitting across, the producer of the show, Joshua Draper, who's, a master improv, both teacher and practitioner. So we've had so much fun doing it. But it's like getting locked into a character in a mask. That's where like the magic happens. And same in the shamanic realms, like the shamans who put on a mask, they become the mask. And in some ways, even though they're not their normal self, they're more of themselves rather than less of themselves.
It's such a big deal. Also to like be witnessed doing that, to have people witness you changing and to see that side of you and to like welcome you back after. Like, I saw that change in you.
Yeah.
It's such a big deal.
It's so fun. And like, actually, so spontaneously, we were at a party here in Sedona, and it was for our sister Madeline's birthday. And her theme was cowboys and aliens. And so the theme for the party was cowboys and aliens. So I went with cowboy, and spontaneously this character, Huckleberry Red, came out. And it was so fun playing Huckleberry Red. And I got, the brother who works on our farm and is taking care of this land. It's a father and son, and the son's named Cody. And Cody has a holster for like a real gun, but I put like a fake alien gun in my holster, and I was cruising around, and I was Huckleberry Red for 2 hours, and it was so magnetic, and people were asking me questions as Huckleberry Red, and I was responding, and I got to be this character for hours. And then everybody who's at the party was like, they want that character to come back. And sometimes I have access to it and sometimes I don't, but like to lock into that character, there was such a joy and aliveness in it. So, and I think that's the golden side of a mask, is when you like step into a performance and allow some aspect of yourself to shine that normally wouldn't.
So this is probably when I should introduce myself.
Yes. Yes.
My name's Zyla. I'm Kim's angelic psychic, and sometimes I drop down into her body. Not yet on a first date. I've never shown up on a first date, but I'm here and I protect her, and sometimes I drop down into the human body and I just say the things that Kim wouldn't be so likely to say. But it's great to meet you, Aubrey. Really special.
It's great to meet you, Zyla. Do you have any messages you'd like to share with me?
I usually talk about the sacredness of the erection. So I don't know if that's on topic for our podcast, but I do want to just drop it in there, just to stay with this idea of the masculine, that the first image that we have that's ever drawn, that we have on record, the first image is in the caves in southern France. And it's of a man, a shaman, chasing the game, the wild creatures, and he has an erection. And he does. And this image has really perplexed many historians and many mystics. And really, if you look at it like I look at it, which is that humans are lost and they've lost their direction. We could think about the erection as a kind of aimed life force that knows where it's going. It's not about fucking necessarily. It could be, but it's not like genital. It's not a genitals thing. It's a psychic force that moves one towards one's life. And until we get right with the erection, knowing that it is also sacred, enough of the sacred vulva and the sacred womb and all of it. It's enough stuff about that. I mean, more stuff about it, but we need to rise up with no pun, rise up with a sacred erection. So that's my message, and I think I've said way too much. And I hope you don't think that I don't have other types of things to say.
I thank you, Zyla. I agree, actually, that this sacred erection pointed and allured. The allurement of the sacred erection is also important. What is it that draws the masculine forward, draws the tumescence forward? What is that allurement? And that is the goddess. And not the goddess only embodied in a woman, but the goddess at large. The mother, the goddess. Like that's what draws forward the masculine, and it allures the masculine to their greatness. So, wise words, Zyla.
Bring back the erection.
Yes.
I'm gonna hop out of Kim's body now. She'll take off this mask, and thanks, Aubrey.
Yeah. Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Zyla, for dropping that pearl. That's perfect. And it's a perfect example of how like a mask can give you permission to say, because that would have been an awkward topic of conversation.
No, it's awkward.
But not with Zyla.
Not with Zyla. No, Zyla doesn't have a problem with it. Yeah. No, she's great.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's the shadow side of a mask, and then there's the light side of a mask. And I think it's beautiful in this story because it's one of the traps. You know, this is actually another example of, okay, this is a trap. And, man, I'm going to have so much fun because I have an idea for a card deck. I don't even think I've talked to you about it, but I'm working on it with Alana, and I can't wait to talk to you about it because this is going to be so fun. We have, we have.
No, now that Zyla's out of the box, I'm like, you're going to see I'm like on another planet basically. Yeah.
But so we're moving into Kairos. We got to finish our story here.
Okay.
This is part of where we were going. So Kairos is a Greek word. For those of you who don't know the word, it's Kairos, and it explains the ineffable, timeless space that we can access that is outside of linear time. And we pulled that as a destination for ourselves in this journey that we're taking. So, what's your relationship with Kairos?
Well, I would say that Kairos time is, I've come to know it through ceremony, basically.
Me too.
And through, any creative act where like it's full on life force, like playing the piano or whatever, surfing, the time is not what it once seemed that it was. But also just thinking about time as an actual ingredient in one's life, I think is really interesting too. If you think of like just sort of the alchemy of one's life, how, the fire of a match is so different from the fires like at the burning ghats in India that have been burning since the city was a city. Mm-hmm. And the different qualities of that fire because of time, because of the ingredient of time. So I don't have anything so much more to say about it than that. Just a real curiosity about how it moves from something that's linear and trackable to something that is just so beyond, my perception, really.
So the interesting thing about Kairos is that if you think of time, so time was explained to me by Nassim Haramein as the memory of God. Time is the memory of God. There's no time without memory. Time is inherently a story, right? Like, so it weaves something from past, present to future. So we're always in Chronos. That's the place where we are. And we can sometimes lightly touch into Kairos. But the thing is, the moment that it becomes a memory, it's out of Kairos itself. So it's like we can glimpse it from afar, but, you know, and sometimes you're actually in it. For me, it's like very, very rare that I'm in Kairos, except maybe when I'm sleeping. Like if I'm asleep, the conscious mind is asleep. I'm in this timeless time where I once had a dream. So I guess the closest I would say that I've gotten to Kairos is actually not psychedelic medicine, because I almost always am aware of myself and the process of the journey. I mean, I had a wildly large and strong Bufo journey, and many people step into Kairos where they don't remember what happened, but I remember the whole thing. And it's an interesting aspect of me in my waking mind. It's very difficult for me to step into Kairos. It's like maybe happened maybe once or twice where it's just like, I don't remember. There was a Vilka experience I had with Don Howard where, you know, I encountered the goddess, and she had a gown made of stars, and she said, you know, this, from beyond this point, you'll remember nothing. And I go, what? And then I woke back up from that experience, and I was very poorly singing an Icaro of some sort that kind of came through, but I'm not a very good singer, like objectively just not. I can chant all right, and she just goes, shh, shh. And I was like, oh, okay. There's other people trying to go through their journey, and I'm just belting this song. But in a dream, I remember I had a dream where I was with my mother's horse, and I was with this horse Germanicus, which was a Frisian stallion, which I had a very strong relationship with. Not as strong as my mother's horse, but I'd watched this horse grow up from, a young horse into a full, beautiful black stallion, and, ridden it many times and gone to visit it in the stables. And I had a dream with Germanicus of a whole lifetime where we lived, where we were just on a journey and journeying through different lands and in different battles and different situations. I had a whole lifetime of a dream. And it was probably in one fraction of one cycle of sleep that I had a whole lifetime that I lived with this horse. And I woke up from that dream like, holy shit, I just dreamt a whole lifetime. Wow. And that, I guess, would be an example of Kairos. Yeah. Like, what was that?
Yeah. It's like the thing expands inside. You have you have a minute, a measured amount of time, and then inside of it goes.
My eyes were fluttering. You know, I'm in REM for a couple minutes. Yeah. And then a lifetime I'm living in the dream world beyond time. It's also interesting that the part of us while we're dreaming, or the tracker that's there knowing time, actually, my mom was just visiting me, and she had a dream that it was like her 50th birthday party, and something happened. And she's telling me this dream, and we're walking, and in my mind, I'm like, what happened 50 years ago, to this day? I'm not going to trip on my mom. I'm just going to let her have her own dream process. So we're just walking. She's like, oh my God, 50 years ago to yesterday is the day I married your father. And I was like, oh my God, what is the tracker inside of us that knows that 50th year is about to happen, and sends the mom a dream with a 50th birthday party so that she can actually go back and recognize the significance of this day? Like, who is that in the storyline of our archetypes? The one who's just like, no matter what we're doing, remembering a year ago this occurred, 10 years ago, even though time in some ways doesn't exist anyways, but there is still a measurer that's helping us. And I think it's the aspect of God that has memory. Yeah. And some people call that the Akash, but as soon as there's movement, there's memory. The only place without memory, and the only place where Kairos truly exists, is unicity. In unicity, in absolute unicity, which is stasis, it's stillness. Because unicity means it's everything. So there's no differentiation. So nothing can move, nothing can evolve, nothing can change, nothing can transform. Not even an atom can spin, because it's unicity. There's no electrons, protons, neutrons. There's no differentiation. So Kairos is the pure, it's like the Tao, it's like the sleeping Tao of unicity, what I call the force. And I'm writing about my new book, You vs. Anti, called The Force. It's the unicity that's behind it that carries no memory. But at the moment that God goes conscious and goes, I am, then memory begins. And I think so, and as you pointed to, like even in my dream, I dreamed a dream that contained Chronos. So in my Kairos dream, I dreamed Chronos into my dream. Right?
Like now we really have to do Kegels. We're so far out. We're just like, where are we even? Like, bring it back. Oh my God.
Sacred erection, let's go.
Thank God there's time. Thank God we are just right here.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, we promised that we would talk a little bit more about the creative act. And we've gotten to some of that in this process and in the storytelling. And also, first of all, a blessing to you for making this incredible deck, a deck that can lead us through this podcast and open up so many beautiful topics that we wouldn't have talked about. Like we didn't plan this. We didn't go through and shuffle them and say, this is what we're going to do, and it allowed us to share so much, allowed us to share stories and a poem and different things. So you've created a technology and also the purity of the deck itself and how it was made. And that's also a very interesting story because you talked about how not only is the deck inviting the mystery to weave through us, capital M mystery, God, whatever you want to say, but actually you used the mystery to actually help you create the deck itself.
Especially with the Archetypes deck, just to go back to this original idea of like letting God in. And there is also this spectrum of control of the artist. Once you refine your line and can draw like whatever. Once you can draw whatever, well, what are you going to do then? What are you going to choose to draw? And like my teacher suggested, like follow the line. And it's like, well, then I have to walk the walk to some degree. If I'm going to be believing in this like divine force that drops in, at some point I just have to make the pen available for whatever image wants to come forward. So a lot of the practices that I do to even like see the image is about letting it be seen. I mean, this goes into the distinction between like visionary artist and psychological artists, like that Jung defined these two different types of artists actually. And a lot of people say visionary, they use the word a lot, but it actually, if you look at it in his teachings, is really specific. And it means that it's a willingness to let God as far in to the equation as possible. So my practice stretches as far as I can into that. Like I draw with the mindfold on a lot. I do nidra and ask for an image. I'm just like, how far can I go out of this equation? How little of me can there be here? And still hold a meaningful image for the collective. So that was my ask with this deck. I made a list of all the different archetypes and then used a pendulum to decide like, hey, what's the most meaningful names and descriptive words for these archetypes? Which ones should be here? Which ones shouldn't be? And I followed it, even though it said no hero in this deck. I mean, that was really hard for me. As like the scholar in me is like, I'm making an archetypes deck with no hero. It's like embarrassing. What are they going to think of me? I don't know my hero's journey myth,
Mm-hmm.
But over and over, I'd ask, that's not the game actually for right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's more of like a village community, archetype that wants to come forward in the place of the hero. But
what also allows the hero to be embodied by every archetype.
Exactly, because it's in all of them. There's the heroic aspect of all. So this deck really allowed me to experiment with like, how far can I lean back and allow as much of the unknown in as possible. And that's where I get really stoked as an artist. It's like most engaged when I'm trained and I'm ready to do the thing, but I'm like barely holding the pen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, for me is, I think poetry is probably the purest expression of my art. Obviously speaking, and there's a lot of other ways that my artistic expression comes out. But for me, it's always been poetry. I've been writing poems since I was a kid. Now the poems when I was a kid are not that great. But some of them were actually pretty good. I remember I got called in, my parents got called into a meeting with the principal of my 6th grade class because we had an assignment to write, like a poetic short story of some sort. And so it's kind of like a blend of a story and poetry. And I wrote a story about a man who wanted to kill himself. And this man had a dog sled, and he just takes the sled out into the middle of a whiteout winter storm. And he like hugs and kisses his dogs, and he lets them free from the sled. And then he lays down in the snow and quietly lets the cold, take away his last breath of life. And the principal called in and was like, hey, you can't write your kids' stuff. like this is not. And they're like, we didn't fucking write that. And then they looked at me like, the fuck is wrong with this kid? Where did he come? But I don't know where that came from.
What's wrong with him? And they're jealous of you because you can write better than them.
Yeah, totally. So, but in this poet, like, I don't know where that
sounds so epic. First of all, where's the winter landscape in your childhood? Or were you?
I went skiing.
I went skiing. That's like a very epic winter.
Yeah, I think, but also I did read Call of the Wild, Jack London, and that was very impactful for me. That story of White Fang and what was the first wolf's name? I think it was Huck, but he two devils, whatever the name of that wolf is. But I was really fascinated with this story, and I think so that also, influenced this idea of those winter times and dog sleds and that nature. But, where I was getting to is when I'm writing a poem, oftentimes it feels like there's a balloon string that comes down from the muse and comes down from the heavens. And this balloon string has maybe just a phrase or maybe like one little idea. And if I give it enough attention and I just keep pulling, like the whole balloon, which is like this helium balloon, will come down, and I'll start to be able, and as soon as I get the first little bit of it, even if I'm in a hurry and I have to go or do something else, as long as I've pulled down enough of the string, I can get back to it and I can stay with the purity of the idea.
Yeah, and I think the key word among so many great words is like the attention. You said like giving it the attention to pull the string down. And I think that art really it's like the evidence of the material evidence of our attention and devotion to a question or an image or whatever it is that wants our attention. Like when I walked through the Met, at some point I was like, whoa, this is just accumulated attention. Every painting is like they're paying attention to a lemon on a table. A still life, if you really break that down and like what's going on, I mean, it's nuts. They're just like, I'm going to care about this curve right here so much. Just weeks, like this matters. And to say like this matters, that consistently until you've completed the painting is like, that's very radical.
Yeah. And it reflects something, for me that I think is a deep, deep spiritual truth. God cares about you with that same level of attention. It's like looking at you and going, tell me your story, sweetheart. Like, tell me your story. Tell me every little bit of your story. And I think one of the challenges we feel is our parents don't give us that attention. And of course not. They have their own lives, and sometimes maybe they do. But we superimpose the father to the capital F father, or the mother, our mother, to capital M mother, and we forget, like, actually, these are just stand-ins and they're doing their best, but they're fallible. But actually, the real father cares so much about your story.
Yeah.
Like, cares about every little bit. That's the hashgaha. That's the divine intention. Like, cares so much. Like, and then, so to care so much about a lemon is like an image of how much God cares about us. And I really believe that to be true.
Yeah, it's so saturated with just devotion of what is.
Mm-hmm.
It's so beautiful. We got to get to the Met. When we have our school, we'll spend some times looking at the still life paintings and talk about the lemons.
Well, in this,
we could paint lemons.
This unlocked for me a greater appreciation of that, because I never connected that. So this idea of connecting the attention to a still life, now I have a whole new, that's the beautiful thing about art, is like when you actually go deeper and understand it, it opens up the pleasure of experiencing it. Like, I used to smoke cigars, but I knew nothing about cigars. And then I went and I spent some time with the real cigar aficionado. And he talked about how they pack the tobacco, how they dry the tobacco, which leaves they use for the wrapper, how they cultivate it and everything. And it gave me an understanding. So now when I smoke a cigar, there's so much more pleasure. Same with a wine. Like, if you really spend the time to be a sommelier, you actually can enjoy the pleasure of that wine so much more. And they're like, oh, this wine's good. You may not even be able to discern. But now what you've unlocked for me is like a new appreciation and a pleasure for still life paintings, which I've never really, I've been like, oh, that's cool. It's accurate. Yeah. You know, it really looks like a lemon. But now I have like, oh, fuck.
No, it's goes back to the shaman in a way, like thinking about the shaman's rattle, let's say. It's like accumulated attention that rattle contains compared to like the rattle you'd get from Toys R Us or whatever. You have two rattles. What's the difference? It's just one is imbued with a certain kind of presence, just time after time of focusing on the attention of the chant and the sound and listening to the rattle. It's like, I think our power and our ability to like actually wake the thing up through attention. I feel like that's the call of the artist. That's the gift of the artist, no matter the material. It's like when you watch an athlete, like it is awake. You know, the shot is awake. The line of the ball is awake. And that's because of like the amount of attention that's been repeated over and over and over. And that's what's so like dazzling about it. It's like, how can the ball move like that in their hands?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with like a sculptor that has that dedication to the stone carving or whatever it is.
Yeah. So that lesson of, all right, you want to be an artist, great. It's like Stephen Pressfield talks about this really, really well. He's a professional. He has a book called Turning Pro. And in this book, Turning Pro, he goes, I don't know when the muse is going to come and when I'm going to be able to write my best work, but I sit my ass in my seat every morning at 9 a.m. and the muse knows where to find me. That's where I'm going to be, and I'm going to be writing. And sometimes she's there and sometimes she's not, but she knows where to find me, because every fucking day, and I'm sure he takes some days off, but like every fucking day, I'm there in my seat, ready to write.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why the artist got this word inspiration and they're all waiting for that. I mean, imagine if athletes used that word. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Why did we do that to ourselves?
I'm waiting for inspiration to practice my free throws.
Exactly. I'm just not inspired right now. Like, it's just like free throws are just so not my thing right now. I don't know. I really feel called to do like more, just whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
It just, why do we buy into that game?
Yeah.
I don't know why. It's heartbreaking to me.
Yeah. And it prevents us from actually moving into being the artist that we're here to be.
Yeah.
You know, like everybody loves ideas of like creative, I'm in creative block. Okay. Well, what do you do with the block? You just keep chipping away.
Yeah.
You keep chipping away. Keep chipping away. And the block will either move or you'll break it up into small pieces that you can assimilate, and that's part of the process. It's that diligence and dedication. And such a strong message that I think you're offering as such a prolific artist to get like back to the fundamentals. You know, there's stories of Kobe Bryant and people watching him practice. And the story comes from Brent Pello, who went to camp with Kobe to, learn basketball. But Kobe would practice, and have an open practice session. And he watched him just do a jab step for an hour without doing anything else. Just jab step, jab step, jab step. And it's like, oh. And then you see like, oh, it's the Black Mamba. He can do anything. But what is he doing? Just fundamentals.
It's so cool.
Fundamentals.
That is the, if that's the kind of first day I want to be on. Just like the guy who can do that kind of thing, that has like the capacity to just hold that position and like just gonna practice fundamentals. It's such a big deal. And then you're in the game and it's like the flow can occur. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but like you have everything kind of at your fingertips to deal with, the flow state or not the flow state. And I feel like we're always kind of chasing this flow state. Like, why? You have to show up in the sticky part and like see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So who do you think, who is the type of person that creatively fit what you're teaching coming up for our Malibu Summit leading up to that? Who is it for? Who is it not for?
I would say it's for anyone that feels a creative plateau. Super good for a creative plateau. Like say you're been making a lot of things, but you've just sort of hit this point where you're like, I kind of know what I make, but I know there's more. Mm-hmm. Or if it's been a really long time since you've like played the guitar, or you haven't really written a poem, but you used to, like I used to. Mm. And I would say if there's like a certain feeling of like fatigue and life force that's just like not there, a lot of times like awakening the creative, you kind of get back into your like Shakti. You're like, whoa, I'm alive. Like I forgot. So I would say it's especially good for those types. Also, if you're like into the mysticism, we're going to go deep into the mysticism too. Mm-hmm. And the symbols and why certain symbols move us, and dream work, a little bit of Jungian stuff. Talk about the artist as shaman. And then who it's not for, it's really not for, God, I want to say this in like a British accent again because I'm uncomfortable saying this, but it's really not for those who don't have an open mind. So I'm more interested in not so much like how good can you get at drawing in this 13-week course, rather like what's the drawing look like after we do a breath practice for 5 minutes? What does that drawing look like compared to the one you would have done before? Which is basically coming from your mind and your ego, and is like that psychological artist that has everything planned. They're essentially illustrating their ideas.
Right.
Which is helpful, it's fine. But I want to move into the visionary artist, which means we have to do practices and learn techniques that are mostly ancient and helpful for us to get out of like the ego space that knows what it knows and wants to make good art and needs to know that it's going to look good. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm going to be moving people into that field. Beautiful.
Yeah. Well, Kim, it's been such a pleasure to get to know you deeper and deeper, and to actually have a gnosis deep inside that this allyship is going to extend through Chronos, through Kairos, through time and lifetime. So
thank you.
Yeah, so much love to you, and I'm so excited for all the people who are going to get to experience you in this Fit for Service coming up. It's going to be incredible.
Thank you so much, Aubrey.
Yeah, and please check out her decks. I mean, if you saw what this archetype deck has just offered for us, it has this opportunity. I know my sister, who I admire as much as anybody in my life, Waira, she brings this with her everywhere she goes, and it guides her in her ceremonies and her journeys. And so it's such a powerful tool. So thank you so much for your art, for your work, for your heart.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you, everybody. We love you so much, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning into this video. Make sure you hit subscribe. Follow me at Aubrey Marcus. Check out the Aubrey Marcus podcast, available everywhere. And leave a comment. Let me know if this video resonated or what else you would like to hear from me in the future. Thank you so much.